All right, we're live and it's showtime. So everyone, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. So this conversation was supposed to happen yesterday, but my conversation partner Chloe, she was on the road and she couldn't be part of the conversation. We had to move it today, but she had a very stressful time. So here I have Steve with me, my very good friend Steve, and I would say my best white friend. I would say Steve Jared Jordan here with me in this conversation today in this stream. Um, Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about three of the biggest things that has just happened in America, about the Fina rulings, about the Roe versus Wade Supreme Court rulings, also about the Supreme Court rulings on the gun safe or the gun laws in New York City and all that. So what we're going to do is we're going to maybe take each of them, take 30 minutes or some time to talk exclusively on each of those topics. Then after that we can now have a general conversation, because if we just want to dive into the topics we might just find ourselves hopscotching as we tend to do here at times. But aside that, in other news, Steve, myself, and Ada, our very good friend Ada, we just developed a kind of a pack, an info pack on how to deal with false racism allegations. So you guys can check that out in differentvoiceinitiative.uk. I think it's something that you find very interesting in terms of dealing with people who just, they just accuse you of being racist for because you have a white
Yep.
skin, basically.
Yeah.
We're not saying that racism doesn't exist. It sure does exist, but at times people take
Absolutely.
advantage of the fact that it exists to just falsely accuse someone, like we see in the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp situation. We know that men are violent towards women. We know that most of the violence, physical violence in marriages, is from men towards women, but that doesn't mean that all violence in marriage is that way. At times it is the opposite way. At times it may not be anybody, but one person is lying about it and one person is making a claim about it. So when such things happen, you need to have tools to be able to deal with it, and basically that's what we did to provide that info pack, because I think most of the time people just they just cower and they back down and they take it, and which is not good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Steve, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Um, you know, uh, just trying to unwind from a long work week, and I tried not to think about Roe versus Wade too much yesterday. I had to get my work done, but it has been weighing heavily on me since I got off work. But
But, but, but Steve, you are not a woman. How could Roe versus Wade be weighing you down so much? I mean, nothing about your rights has been tampered with. Nothing about your right
right.
has been. So, I don't get why it's weighing down on you.
Well, sometimes when I look at stuff, especially stuff like Roe versus Wade, it might not be the result that I'm most interested in. Sometimes it's the argument itself. And that's, one of the things that I've been really kind of thinking about since yesterday was just how the arguments were made. I didn't like. But when it comes to things that do affect me, I mean, my wife's health affects me. So in some sense, those rulings do affect my life in significant ways as well. Plus, I have a daughter, I have sisters, I have a mother, I have friends who are female. All of these people impact my life in different ways. So
Right. So, like I said, we're going to take each of these topics one after another. So let's go with the FINA situation first. FINA, basically, if I'm correct, is a body that regulates swimmers in the U.S. Is it? Am I correct?
yeah,
That
FEMA.
sport. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any of the other rulings that came out. Simply because Roe versus Wade being overturned has been probably the biggest issue that we've even heard. I don't even know about the other ones, to be honest. That's how out of the loop I am. So maybe perhaps you can explain to us what these rulings were. Charles?
All right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let me just go through an article. I think there's an article here um, from the New York Times, on this ruling. It says sports is again divided over inclusiveness and a level playing field. A ruling by swimming's world governing body effectively bars transgender women from high levels of competition in the name of fairness. And critics say the decision itself was unfair. So, so Fina's proposal is to create a so-called open category of competition to protect competitive fairness, but a separate category is in quote isolating, demeaning, and has the potential to make transgender and non-binary competitors into a spectacle on an international stage, said Anne Lieberman, the director of policy and programs at Athletes Ally, which seeks to end transphobia and homophobia in sports, said in an email Wednesday. Okay. The attempt to balance inclusiveness and fairness, especially regarding the eligibility of transgender and intersex athletes, is among the most complicated and divisive issues in sports. Reasoned arguments are made on both sides. Going through puberty as a male provides physical advantages that persist even after testosterone levels are suppressed, such as broader shoulders, bigger legs, longer torso, denser muscles, greater heart and lung capacity. So maybe I'll just summarize basically because I think I went through it before. So what the ruling was basically about was that trans women, as in biological males who transitioned into um, women, um, would not be allowed to participate in the women's category except they meet certain criteria. In fact, the ruling was called a transgender inclusion um, bill or whatever they call it, a transgender inclusion law or something for that body. So it states that if for any trans woman who wants to compete in a female category, they either have to have transitioned by the time they were 12 years old or they cannot compete. So if you have a trans person that wants to compete in the women's category, if they haven't transitioned before the age of 12, they cannot compete in that female category. So, and some conservatives are happy about this ruling that it's protecting women's sports and all that. And also, they want to create a separate category that is neither male nor female. That you can have trans trans people compete in that category. So, what do you think about this, Steve? Your mic is muted. Can't hear you.
I hate that. Sorry. It was proposed quite a while ago by what I believe are conservatives. I'm a little fuzzy on the history, but that we should have separate categories for trans men and trans women for the Olympics and other sporting events. And to a certain degree, I'm concerned about that. The reason why is because it slightly reeks. Well, I don't know if the word "slightly" is appropriate. I'll just say this: it reeks of Plessy v. Ferguson in the sense that separate but equal. Right? Are we traveling down another path similar to Plessy v. Ferguson, where separate but equal means we can segregate certain people out of certain events purely because they don't, they're a different type of person. You know what I mean? Because that's what Plessy v. Ferguson did. Was they said, well, black folk are, racialized black folk are human beings, but they are not equal in essence, right? And we were able to segregate the entirety of society based on that law or based on that ruling. I'm concerned that we're headed down that same path. I'm a little bit, I wish I had a more solid opinion for you, but honestly, I'm kind of torn on a lot of these topics where I'm just not well enough educated on it. But I can see arguments from both sides and be like, God, there's some really good arguments here that really should be heard and talked about, honestly and respectfully, because I understand the concerns that non-trans people have about trans people competing in sports, right? Because we are seeing kind of some interesting results, meaning we see a lot more trans women winning in women's sports, but we're not seeing the inverse of that, where we're not seeing a bunch of trans men dominating men's sports, right? And I know there's some problematic languages. Please don't kill me over that. But I'm curious about the arguments that are being made, because there are some arguments, like if you're going to talk about genetics, okay, well, Michael Phelps was born with a much larger heart than most of the competitors that he is competing against. So is that a genetic advantage, right? Why is he allowed to compete due to a competitive advantage of having a larger heart, but other people aren't? You get what I'm saying? So there's some good arguments here for both sides, and I'm not sure I have the, well, as a matter of fact, I know for sure that I do not have the amount of knowledge necessary to really truly argue that from that position. So I'm glad that they're taking the position that we need to start planning, and we need to start talking about this, and we need to start making rules. Perfectly fine with that. I just don't know the details of it, and I don't know the counterpoints and the points for it. So it's just, I'm kind of up in the air as far as that's concerned. But that being said, I'm always going to side on trying to advocate for trans folk and their rights to be in society and to compete within sports like every other human being. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out, do we need to change the rules? Do we need to amend the rules? Do we need to modify them in some way to be more inclusive? I'm not sure where the line is going to be drawn, but I think it's a valuable conversation that we need to start having.
All right. So, do you think that there should be separate categories for men and women? Because I mean, you said something about separate but equal,
Right.
and how that is a bad thing. I mean, that was applied
No,
to
you've got a valid,
genetics and
that's a
everything.
valid argument. Very valid argument, Charles. And that's where I'm at, is that we already separate them, right? We already segregate them into sexes. But we also, before now, we had a very distinct difference between those two. Like, we know for a fact that men are faster at a lot of different sports. They can take a beating, a brutal beating. Their endurance is somewhat higher. Like, there's a bunch of different things in line here that we know that men do differently than women, right? Even Serena Williams came out saying, like, I don't want to compete against men. I will get my ass kicked every single time, right? So I understand the argument there, and I can't deny that argument is extremely valid. I'm cautious. I'm always cautious whenever somebody tries to make a truth claim based on science that we're not confident about yet.
Now, this brings me to a question that I don't think anyone has asked recently, which is, what is a man that Serena is afraid of competing against? What is a man? I mean,
Yeah.
we've heard questions of what is a woman. Documentaries have been made on what is a woman. What is a man? Why is nobody saying anything about men? You are a men's rights advocate, Steve. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us what a man is?
The more and more I dive into it, the less and less that line gets clear. In some ways, I think it's just an arbitrary line that we draw to distinct between two different peoples by gender. Past that, I'm not sure. Right now, I'm still forming arguments in my own head that can advocate for being able to make distinctions between the two. But I mean, what traits does a man have that a woman doesn't carry as well? None. Like, you can find the traits that a man has across all other people, right? They might be present in different quantities, but even then, you still have women that share that quality in the same quantity somewhere else. So the line just isn't really clear. The only thing that I can tell you the difference between a man and a woman really is that individual's perception of what that means to them. That's all I can tell you right now. Even right now, trying to think, okay, well, what are some of the characteristics of men? Well, I have integrity. Well, that's not just solely men. I'm honorable. Well, that's not solely men. I'm physically active. I can kick a soccer ball. Well, men and women can do that. I'm really having a hard time trying to figure out the difference between the two, aside from the fact that a biological woman can have a baby and a non-biological woman cannot. That's like the only difference that I can share. You know what I mean? So, but we understand from the arguments that 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 distinction is purely biological, right? But we're not completely biological beings, right? We have a spirit, we have a soul, we have a mentality, we have belief systems, we have thoughts and feelings of our own, which make up part of that being as a collective person, right? So the line might be a little bit more blurry than I think people are willing to admit.
Steve, I think the line is very clear, and I think I can help you out because you, you,
Yeah, we
you,
disagree on this, but it's okay. I'm
yeah,
willing to
yeah,
hear you.
yeah. You gave out some characteristics of men earlier when you were talking about the sports thing. When you were saying men were faster, they were stronger, they can take a beating more. Those are distinctive characteristics. You understand? It
Mhm.
isn't as if women can't do all those things, but what's the quality? You understand? What's the other things you just said? Those things are more so behavioral traits, and behavioral traits are the fluid, they are plastic. Anybody can have any behavior. You understand?
Mhm.
Any A woman can decide to lift anything she wants to lift, but she may not have the physical capacity to lift something that is bigger than her muscle mass would be able to carry. Doesn't mean she
Yeah,
can't
but
lift
some
things.
women do meet that criteria,
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
Some women
of
are
course.
larger,
Ex-
right?
exactly. The thing, Steve, is there are exceptions in nature. There is no rule that is 100%. But you
Right.
also made mention of something that why is it that the trans women, they go into women's sports and they just absolutely kill it. For example, Leah
Mhm.
Thomas, who was once in the male competition of swimming, he was around 400 and something, and then he comes to the female section, even with all the testosterone suppression and everything, and he's absolutely killing in that field. And then you ask yourself,
Mhm.
okay, maybe this is a glitch, maybe this is this is nothing. There is nothing to look there. What about the women who transition to men? They can't even compete in men's sports, even with the testosterone that they pump themselves with. You understand? So you begin to ask yourself, something is not clicking here. There has to be something else that we're totally ignoring, and we're ignoring the realities that yes, um, these traits
Either
can
we're
be
ignoring
have.
it or we're just not aware of it yet.
No, 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 no. We're very much aware of it. We're just ignoring it. We are ignoring it. But I'm not ready to ignore it because I know it for what it
Yeah.
is, and I'll just say it for what it is. But let's move on from this point.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to give my thoughts about the ruling. Some conservatives they're happy about the ruling, but I think the ruling is a disaster. I think it's a bad thing. I think it was just fine the way it was before, and the reason why I say this is not because I don't think it's not because I support that trans women should compete in female sports. I don't support that actually. Why I think it's a bad thing is because it's brought in children now. So some parents might be forced to transition their kids before 12 years old because they want them to have a career, or some kids might be
Right.
forced to transition before they are 12 years old because they want to have a career in swimming. You understand? And we know
Right.
that for me, I think transitioning of kids is a no, no, no. If you're an adult, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. If you want to be a man, you want to be a woman, very fine. But I just think that I think it's reprehensible that children should be made to go through that. If children cannot, if we all know that children, their prefrontal cortex is not well formed, they can't make certain decisions, they can't buy alcohol, they can't own a firearm, there are certain things they cannot do without their parents consent. Why should it be okay for them to say, okay, well, I believe this about my gender identity, and I want to take these medications that are going to alter my body, or I want to go through certain surgical procedures that's going to alter my body. I'm totally against
Yeah.
that. So for that reason, I think that the conservatives who are happy about this, they're very short-sighted, because it's going to bite them more than they think.
Yeah. You know, you and I do agree on the children in the sense that, you know, the part of the brain that is responsible for decision making, right? Complex decision making doesn't fully form in children until they're about 25, right? So leaving these decisions up to them and not with the parents is I believe a dangerous argument to make. Um, do I believe that we should support children when they themselves make a decision that they're coming out as trans? Can we allow them the opportunity to present as the gender that they choose? Absolutely, I think so. Um, but I don't agree with puberty blockers. I never have. I've been pretty solid on this and pretty consistent. I do not approve of them, because for one thing, we're not completely confident in what they do, what the repercussions of them are. The one that stops puberty the most, that they use the most, has been proven to increase your risk of sterilization in children. And so I think there's some concerns there, and everybody has the right to be able to bring those up for argument and debate. But I think when we stop giving people, even children, the opportunity to express themselves, we are setting a dangerous precedence for a free and open society.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. So there's no point of contention with that for me, because I believe that the way I see it most of the time with this gender identity stuff is the people who are making the arguments that gender and sex are two different things keep conflating it all the time, because in a bid to um, in a bid to express their gender, they are altering their sex. Which to me, if it's just an identity, if it's an identity, there's really no reason to alter your sex. You can alter your lifestyle, you can alter the roles that you do, you can alter the way you speak, the way you dress, the way you communicate, the way you interact with people. I don't see how that relates with you altering biologically yourself by either taking hormones
Mm.
or blocking a process that everybody should go through, because puberty is something, it's a developmental phase of every individual. So blocking it, it just comes with a whole lot of problems. So to me,
Right.
I'm very, very fine with the identity part of, okay, you say you're a man, good, well and fine. Dress like a man, you understand,
Yeah.
but
Present as a man. Yeah.
yeah, present as a man. But when, because the thing that gets me is that in a bid to become a certain gender identity, most of them lose their biological sex, because a man who transitions to a woman and cuts off his penis and has a vagina constructed, I don't know how very functional that vagina is. You understand? By the end of the day, so what exactly are they getting sexually in return for that identity? Same thing with a woman who, cuts off her breasts and maybe has a penis constructed and all that. I don't know how well she's able to, engage in pleasurable sexual activity
Well,
uh,
I think that's
with,
none of our
with
business, Charles.
of course, it's definitely none of our business. I understand that point, but I'm just saying, if I wanted to be nosy and I wanted to snoop in, I'll be like, okay,
Well, I mean, there is a certain amount of curiosity, right? There's like, I'm
yes,
curious about how this thing works. I'm a human being, right?
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
curious. You are different than I. I want to learn more about you. It's like,
exactly,
I've asked you a lot of questions about Nigeria, right? Because I've
yep,
never
yep,
been there. I've never met anybody from there before you. And so I'm
mm,
curious about your culture. I'm curious about your lifestyle, where you live, what it's like living there, right? I'm a curious human being, and I think we're all curious to some degree as human beings, and we want to know about things that we don't know, right? And I
True.
can tell you from a lot of my experiences with trans folk that have fully transitioned, they've enjoyed their lives. I mean, you look at Buck Angel; he has absolutely enjoyed his transition, right? He hasn't had the penis created, but in all accounts, he acts, behaves, and lives as a man. Like I can't look at Buck and be like, "That's not a dude." Buck Angel is a dude, right? If you even if you don't like him, if you don't like his politics, if you don't like what he did for a living, you still can't deny it. You can't tell me that that dude is not a guy. But in other senses, I've met men who transitioned into to women, and they've had great, long-lasting, fulfilling sexual relationships that they absolutely have enjoyed. Now they do have some additional problems on top of that, but still they've been very vocal about how much they enjoyed their transition and how much they enjoy their bodies now, and they feel whole, they feel right, they feel complete, they feel as they should feel being in the body that they're in now. So there are, and between that and this, you're going to have massive shades of gray between all of those differences in human experience. And so I think this is one of those cases where we need to sit, wait, watch, and assess and gain experience, because this is something that's relatively new to society, especially to American society. Is that trans folk have been around for a long time. This hasn't been the dominant conversation in our society for 200 years, right? So we're just learning these things. We're learning how to function as a society with these new identified human beings, and we need to take the time, and we need to learn, and we need to move forward slowly and methodically, and with integrity and respect and honor, and really do everything that we can to learn about these situations so that we can progress further in society towards a better future where we live in a more inclusive and a more equal society.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Buck Angel,
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Uh, well, dude, because he looks like a man, so I'll say dude. Uh, but I can tell you that there are many in the trans community who do not like him because he
Right.
doesn't take the orthodox view. So we can't even use him as an example of presenting this is what the opinions
Well,
or of
he
trans
gets a lot
people
of
are.
shit. He gets a lot of shit. Like I'm going to get a lot of shit because I don't agree with allowing children to chemically transition during puberty. I don't agree with it. Now, people are going to call me transphobic for that, right? I'm going to catch a lot of shit for that. And that's why Buck Angel caught a lot of shit for it too, is because he's like, no, keep your fucking hands off the kids, right? And this is something that, you can call me transphobic. That's all fine and dandy. I'm still going to advocate for trans adults to do as they please, right? I'm still going to be on your side for the majority of the conversation, but that's the children. It's where I draw the line. I'm not having it. I'm not going to budge on it.
But the thing is, Steve, if it's an identity, why deny children that identity? I mean, why
Well, we're not
deny
we're
them?
not we're not denying them. We're allowing them to present as the gender that they choose. But the only difference is we're not going to do something to their body that is irreversible, right? Because there are identifiable problems when we decrease, or when we begin to chemically transition children. There is an after effect, and there's plenty of detransitioners who have come out and expressed this exact same concern. It's like, I wish I wouldn't have transitioned when I was a child, right? There are serious concerns that us lefties, we need to come to terms with. Like, we need to start being honest about it and start having these hard conversations instead of just flapping our gums and being like, oh, transphobe. No, we need to have this fucking discussion.
All right. So let's move on to the other conversation. Let's talk about the one that I think you're very familiar with, and the one that you said was giving you some level of distress, which is that of the Roe v. Wade, Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
So tell me what you know about this decision and the way it's affected you and why what you think about the decision, good or bad, and why you think it's a good or bad thing.
Well, as I've told you, I've always personally I've always been pro-life. I don't agree with abortion at all. However, that opinion stops at my nose, right? I should not and I do not and should not have control over another human being's life, regardless, right? That 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 person having that baby, that's their body, that's their right, it's their ability. They should have the right and ability to control it however they choose, whether I like it or not, right? American society and American libertarianism, as it was um, basically created, I guess you would say. I'm having a hard time with words today. Was based off of the principle of you do you, I do me, we leave each other alone, but we have a system of a judicial system that allows us to discuss how you did violate my laws violate my rights when it does happen. Right. And I understand the conservatives' point of view where they are trying to speak for the unborn. I understand that. But it's the arguments that have been used, and like whether you agree with Roe versus Wade rulings or not, the way that they were argued is intensely problematic for a number of reasons. For one thing, in Roe versus Wade, it was argued poorly because the court just kind of came up with an arbitrary kind of idea of trimesters. And, they didn't necessarily come up with themselves. There was a lot of input there, but there were some problematic issues with Roe versus Wade from the very beginning, which is why we had Casey versus Planned Parenthood and Griswold versus Connecticut, right? We had a number of other different abortion decisions, throughout the years. Like, this is one of the most complicated problems that we've ever faced as a society and as American society, trying to figure out where these lines, these very, very blurry lines are. But the thing that bothered me about yesterday's ruling was Clarence Thomas's opinion, which was in part, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but from what I'm understanding so far is that he makes the argument that because it was not specifically listed as a right, therefore it is questionable and we shouldn't support abortion based off of that. That's problematic on so many fucking levels that I have a hard time keeping track of them, right? For one thing, we have what's called penumbra and emanations. And what that basically, to kind of dissolve that down to understandable, right? Look at a shadow, right? You can see a shadow, but sometimes that shadow doesn't have a clear definable border. Okay. That's what penumbra and emanations are, is the meaning, the context, and the spirit of the Bill of Rights and the amendments therein. The Ninth Amendment is speaking to that directly, saying that, and I actually have it listed here, right here, and I'll bring it up. It says, the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So what does that mean? That means that there's other rights that are not formally listed in the Bill of Rights that a human being can have, that a government has a responsibility to protect. Abortion is one of those rights. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, the right of a woman to control her body is a human right. And you don't have to fucking like it. Sorry, but it's a right nonetheless. And the Ninth Amendment protected and defended that right. But it's not being argued correctly, right? Clarence Thomas is arguing because it's not listed succinctly and primarily in the Bill of Rights that it should be overturned. That's a horrible ass idea, because now you're opening the gates to anti-miscegenation overturning. You're opening the gates to gay rights and gay marriage being overturned. Like the list goes on and on and on because they weren't primarily listed in the Bill of Rights. It's fucking stupid, right? Anti-slavery legislation. That wasn't in the original Bill of Rights, so should we just ignore that too? It's like, come on. It's just a piss poor argument from Clarence Thomas, and it just bothered me that a Supreme Court justice who's been on the bench that long made that stupid of an argument. Just it bothers me so much.
Okay, Steve. But I think I get where he's coming from. I think you sort of made an allusion to that point in the first place, in the sense that the way the Roe versus Wade was concluded in the first place was shady. I mean, you shared a video that sort of gave a breakdown. So there was there was no way that the Constitution in any way ever made a reference that you could directly link to the rights of a woman to abortion. There was no way. It was just sort of made up and added into that
Well,
this thing. So in that sense, I think I may have to agree with Justice Clarence Thomas. No, I get the point that you're making, where it makes it seem as if it is not literally written in the Constitution that this is protected, then it shouldn't be protected. We know that doesn't make any sense, because
yeah,
there are so many other things that's not literally written in the Constitution, but that we can make an argument for. Okay, that this can be protected. Now, the point where I will vehemently disagree with you is that how do you come about saying that abortion is a woman's rights? I see. I agree with you when you say that a woman has a right to her body, 100%. She has a right to do with whatever she wants
mm-hmm.
to do with her body. But once a pregnancy is involved, it stops just being her body. It's now two individuals who are distinct, who have distinct genetic material, and two individuals who are living. They are living beings. You understand? So in that sense, the woman's right, because you said something the other time that your rights, your whether your rights or whatever stops at the other person's nose. So I think that a woman's right at that point in time stops when a
Mm-hmm.
fetus is involved. You understand? So if
Yeah,
it was just her alone, heck, she can do whatever. She can decide not to get pregnant. She can, decide to take out her womb. She can decide to cut off her breast. I mean, trans people already do that. She can decide to cut off a limb. I have no issues whatsoever. But I recognize the fetus as a distinct being of its own, such
yeah,
that once you put that into the equation, it stops being about her alone. Now it sucks that another being is inside you. You understand? Whether you want them or not. You understand? It sucks. We do know it sucks. Maybe you do not really want them. Maybe you were raped. Maybe some other issues happen, but the fact still remains that this is another being, and we have to look for other ways of dealing with that conflict of interest, because certainly
yeah,
the 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 fetus there's an interest there for the fetus. The fetus has an interest to live. That's why it's that's why it's growing. That's why it's taking nutrients from the mother's blood to grow. So there's an interest to live.
mm-hmm.
The mother's interest is there as well. The mother might not want that child at that point in time. So there's a conflict of interest. So why should the mother's interest take precedence over that of the child if these are two distinct individuals? So that's where I
Yeah.
dissent with my body,
Well,
my choice. Yeah, your body, your choice. But once the fetus is involved, it stops being your body alone.
I'll tell you what, you provide a really good argument, and that argument needs to be heard, right, and debated. My disagreement comes where there's a point of viability, and I don't want to get caught too much on the definitions here, because I think we should be focusing on the integrity of the ruling itself. But I want to cover this really quickly. Is that I want to acknowledge the fact that there's a couple of different ways that your argument kind of goes wrong, which is if I have a parasite in my body, I should have the right to remove it. Well, the argument is that a lot of people face, and a lot of people bring up, is that up until viability, it is nothing more than a parasite, right? Up until the point of viability, which I think it was like between 15 and 25 weeks, it's basically a parasite living off of the other person, and that's when the majority of self termination happens, right? So there's some sketchy lines in there, but even so, even if you did, if we both had discerningly different ideas, which we do, we still have to make some kind of compromise because we live in a society of people who think differently, who have different beliefs, right? Why not make a compromise? And Roe versus Wade was that compromise. Nobody was happy with it. Nobody was fucking
Steve,
happy with it. But it set a precedence for a compromise that we could all at least live with. And they just screwed that. So now what we've done is we've turned SCOTUS into a political forum, and we've also just animated two sides that are already vitriolic towards each other and just made it worse. Couldn't have happened at a worse time. Just couldn't have happened at a worse time.
now, Steve, I find it very disheartening, very disheartening that you would refer to a fetus as a parasite, and that you would even
I
make
didn't.
that
I'm saying that's the argument that they make. I'm not
okay.
doing that.
Whatever, whoever is making that argument, I find it very disheartening and very disturbing for
Mm-hmm.
for many reasons, that anyone would think to look at a fetus, which is a combination of your own genetic material and another
Mm-hmm.
person's genetic material coming together to produce something unique, and to refer to it as a parasite, that's, I mean, it's like, imagine
I
when
agree.
my wife was pregnant with my child, and I'm like, well, up until this point, this child is a parasite. I mean, a parasite takes off you and they had no value to you, they had no meaning to you. But the child has value to you, the child has meaning it had the child brings something to your life. So to refer to it as a parasite, it's, oh god, it's a terrible way of looking at
It
something
feels
like that.
gross to say it that way, doesn't it?
It does, it does. And
I totally get it, dude. Like I said, I'm not making the argument. I'm just presenting the argument as it's been
yeah,
presented
yeah,
before.
yeah.
Um,
Now I don't
Again,
want to
like
go
the hard part. Well, hold on here, Charles, because the hard part, I feel like I have to completely repeat this again. Like people tend to forget that while I'm making these arguments, that I've already stated that I am pro-life. Like I am pro-life to die hard, but my distinction is that my right to tell another person what to do with their body, whether I like it or not, ends at my nose. That is my personal argument. So I just wanted to repeat that so that people were clear about what my views were.
to me, I don't think there's ever any good argument for abortion. There is none. I mean, this might be too uh, militant, as you would say, but I don't think there's any good
I
argument
would
for abortion.
I would
I
say it
think
was because you're forgetting incest, you're forgetting forgetting rape, you're forgetting instances where we know that the baby is going to die before it's even born, thereby endangering the mother's life and health. There's a bunch of different scenarios in which
no,
abortion should
I'm not
be allowed.
I'm not forgetting all those. I'm taking in all
Okay.
those into considerations as the exceptions. You understand? Now, the
Okay.
vast majority of abortions are not done for those reasons.
Well,
Those
let's
are,
let's let's do this. Are there let's figure out where we can agree,
you
because
know,
I think that would be a really good basis to start from.
but you know that most conservatives already agree to abortion on those grounds. So those grounds are not even
I
grounds
don't
for
know that.
contention in the first place. I
I'm
think
not
you do
sure.
know
I
that.
don't know.
If you
But I'm talking to
from
you though.
yeah, okay, good. So maybe we can find out later. But I have a sense, and I think I've read somewhere or so, and I've talked with some conservative people who, you know, of course they agree on that grounds, on certain grounds, on medical grounds, on incest, on rape. So those are not grounds of contention. The grounds of contention is when someone has, engaged in, willful sexual intercourse, and then they get
Yeah.
pregnant as a result, and out of either they don't want the child at that point in time, they're not in a good financial situation, or some other things that has nothing to do with their life being threatened, that has nothing to do with a medical condition, that has nothing to do with incest or rape, that has
Yeah.
everything to do with, to me, that has everything to do with convenience for the mother at that point in time. So that is
Right.
where the contention is for most people. So
Couple things there.
in that regard, there is no good argument for abortion when it comes to having abortion aside the medical incest and the rape.
Well, there is some, and you may or may not agree with them, but generally the largest number of people who get abortions are those who are poor, right? So now what you're doing is you're creating more people who are going to be living in poverty, which is almost never a good situation, right? You're bringing a child into a world where A, the mother and father most likely did not want them. B, they're going to be living in poverty and possibly destitution for the rest of their lives. Is right. So there's a bunch of different reasons. That's not to ignore your previous argument. I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is there are always arguments, whether you like them or not.
Steve, I don't buy that idea. I don't think so. I don't think that the majority of people who are having abortions are having it because of the financial situation. I mean, poverty is relative. What you call poor in the US might be luxury to many people in sub-Saharan Africa, and people are still having kids. By that standards, maybe 80% of the people of Africa should not be having kids. You understand? But they find a way to live life, to make do with what they've been given, and then at times these children, they grow up to become something great. Things change. I mean, okay, Glenn Lowry is an example of someone. Let me just use him as an example of someone who, when his first wife got pregnant, I don't think they were married then, with pregnant with his kid, he had to drop out of school to, to be able to support the family and all that. They were shit poor, but fortune smiled upon him. He worked his ass off. He did so many things, and his life became better. And that's something we have to look at life as a series of stages. Most people, when they're young, aside their parents' wealth, most people are poor. They really don't have anything of their own. But as you age, as you grow up, you begin to accumulate wealth. You begin to, as you accumulate experience. So in that sense, saying that because you are poor today, so you should end the life of another human being, it's not a good argument, because your fortunes could very well change tomorrow. And for the fact that you're rich today is not even enough reason to have kids, because disasters can happen. You could lose all your wealth, you could lose your health, you could lose everything at an instant. So what happens to those kids? Maybe your wife
Well,
just gave birth to a kid that's 1 month old, and then you lost everything. There is no way you could possibly take care of this kid at this point
yeah,
in time. Would you say, oh, now I'm impoverished? This kid, this kid will grow up in poverty, so let's just kill this kid. Aside from that, now there's another way that people are not looking at this thing, in the sense that there are adoption services and I think in America, there are people who are actually looking for kids that would very readily take these children in. There are couples who want kids and all that. So it's not as if
yeah,
the mother
uh,
is going to be stuck with these kids forever. If
yeah.
she doesn't want them, she could very
Well,
literally give out the kid when she delivers this kid and say, I don't want this kid. Let the state take care of this kid for me. So there's so many options, and you know, there's also the option of responsibility. There's also the option of contraception. There's also the option of so many other things. You understand that people could do to not get pregnant in the first place. You're shit poor.
sure.
You're having sex. Contraception is there, and don't tell me about. Don't say contraception are hard to come by. They are not. Even in Africa, they are very cheap. You could get good contraception very
Yeah.
cheap, and at times you can even get them for free. So that is not an argument. So I'm looking at all this and I say, it's those are a very small price to pay for you not having to kill another human being, and people are not willing to do that just for the sake of convenience.
So let's look at the numbers a little bit here. This is by the Guttmacher Institute, and they've taken information from the U.S. Census Bureau and the CDC, which is 74 or 75% are poor or low income. 62% are religiously affiliated. 39% white, 28% black, 25% Hispanic, yada yada yada. 60% are in their 20s. 12% are teens, and 4% are minors. and 59% already come from a family that already has at least one child. So those are interesting statistics. The other thing that we have to keep in mind too is that there's not a lot of people who choose to get abortions. There's really not. Like the number of abortions per year is not really that big. The arguments that I'm concerned with are the ones that aren't being heard, which is absolutely, you should be responsible with who you have sex with, and you should practice safe sex whenever possible. But sometimes even those fail. I mean, two of my kids were conceived while on birth control. So, and to the argument of income and poverty, both of three of my children, actually, all three of them were born while I was living near, close, or under the poverty level. I still made it work, right? So I'm there with you. I'm perfectly fine having that argument, but the point still remains: none of those choices extend past me, right? I still do not have the right to control another human being's body, like pure and simple. I just don't have the right to control my wife's body under any circumstances. You may not like that, but I do not have the right to tell her what she can do and what she can't do with her body, period. Like, she should not have to ask my permission, and the medical field, the medical industry, should not be required to require her to get my permission to get her tubes tied. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's her body. She has a right to do that. But here in the US, unfortunately, because of Roe versus Wade for a long time, she could do that without having to ask my permission in certain states. But now we've gone back to the point where, because Roe versus Wade was overturned, now you've got conservative states restricting the rights of women's reproduction. That's not okay. That's not right. So Roe versus Wade isn't necessarily about the abortions. Roe versus Wade is about women's right to choose. That's what it's always been about. And whether or not someone gets an abortion or not has nothing to do with the fact that they should have the right to be able to get it if they chose to. I know a lot of women, and I've never met one that I know of that has ever had an abortion. They've all carried all of their children to term. Right. So I think people have this misconception that abortion is like wildly out of control. It's not. It's not.
Okay, Steve. I agree with you when you say people can. I have no right to. I have no right to tell a woman what to do with her body. Good and fine. I agree with that. But two things. In marriage, I think I do have a right. I do have a say as per what my wife does with her body. Um, I do have a right. I do have a say with what my wife does with her pregnancy or our pregnancy, because it wasn't just her making the baby, it was the both of us making the baby. And if you were to do a genetic analysis, you will see half of me in that baby. You understand? Now, while I could concede, while I could say, you know what, um, I could say, if my wife wants to have a tubal ligation, she can do that. I could concede that ground, even though within marriage, it is still well within my right to have a say, because marriage isn't just about finances. Marriage is about two of you becoming one. If
Right.
not, if not, you shouldn't have a right to question who your wife sleeps with, because it's her body. If she can absolutely do whatever she wants to do with her body, she could
Marriage
offer
is a
her body to.
contract.
Yeah, it's a contract. That's what I'm getting to. So there are commitments within that contract. There are, it it's not open. It's not like, oh, you can do whatever the hell you want, and the only commitment we have is a financial commitment. No, there are reproductive commitments as well, because part of
Mhm.
the reasons of so why people get married is to have children. So if that is on the table, one person cannot make a unilateral decision on that. So if both of you agree and say, we don't want kids, there's couples that say they don't want kids, and that's fine. So they can do whatever the hell they want to prevent having kids. The man can have a vasectomy, the woman can have tubal ligation. But if that was never on the table, it would be a breach of contract for the man to have what, a vasectomy without his wife's consent or without her knowledge, because it was never agreed that there are not going to be kids in this marriage. So why would she do that? Why would she make a unilateral decision? So in the context of marriage, that all changes. That
Well,
all
I,
changes because you have a responsibility to your spouse and they have a responsibility to you, and it's not
right.
just your body, your choice. No.
Well, I think the reason why I disagree with you here is that there's a disproportionate responsibility once that child is conceived. Once the child's conceived, I can leave. I can go away. I don't have to deal with this problem. She's got to carry that baby for 9 months. And then she's got to take care of that baby for 18 years after I leave, right? So there's a disproportionate responsibility dispersion here, right? So there's got to be some protections for them, right? And if I'm in a marriage, should I not also have to ask my wife's permission medically to get my vasectomy? By all accounts, yeah, I should, but I'm not. What we're finding is that these laws that they're making, these decisions that they're making, are not universal. They're completely unilateral or they're completely lateral to the point where women have to have undue burden that men don't have to do. And that's the problem I have, is these things are unequal as hell. And that's why a lot of the problem that I have, ignoring whatever position I have about pro-choice or pro-life, the way that the argument was made for Roe versus Wade's overturning is something that I have issue with, because that there are so many more problems that are going to come from Clarence Thomas's argument, or um, his opinion, that is extremely concerning. Um, even if you ignore the abortion problem, right? Even if you ignore that, it brings into question so many other things. And that's the part that I've been really concerned about. It's like abortion, yeah, that's a serious conversation we have to have. But how many other conversations also need to be had because of this decision? Like there's a ton of them. There's just a ton of them. Like the repercussions of this decision are going to be exceptionally far-reaching, and I think it's going to do more to harm American society than it's going to do good.
Okay, Steve. So I want to talk about the responsibility, the undue burden you say is being placed on the woman. See,
Right.
that is a fact of life. That is and I wouldn't say an unfortunate fact of life, but that is a fact of life. It is a fact of life that people have different levels of burdens. You understand? Even within a marriage, there are certain aspects that might be an undue burden on the man. Should he now say, because there's a possibility that there's an undue burden on me on this, then we shouldn't have this in the first place. Most of the time, once the kid is born, there is an undue burden on the man to provide financially for that kid.
Not if I'm not
And
there.
not if you're not there, but there's an undue burden if you're there. There is an
Sure.
undue burden if you're there. So the man could
Well,
very well say, you know what, I don't think I can take care of this kid anymore. Let's kill this kid. But no, he wouldn't say that. But we do know that there is an undue burden on him. So it's not where I think it's very problematic when we try to finally tune everything to a balance where, it must be 50-50, there must be a 50-50 responsibility. But life doesn't work that way. In no other area of life do we demand such things. We say things are fluid all the time. We say things are plastic all the time. But here in marriage, we want it to be 50-50. If there's any slight um, burden that is higher on the women, is a problem. But that isn't that isn't life. People have the different sexes have their own sort of unique burdens or unique challenges within marriage itself. So I don't think it's fair to say on that ground, then this should be allowed for the woman. And like I said earlier, a woman can do whatever the hell she wants to do with her body. But once
Mhm.
another being is involved, she has no rights whatsoever in that regard. Now, I wanted to bring you back. There was a point you made earlier before talking about compromise, that this striking down of Roe versus Wade just takes away the compromise that we nobody was really satisfied with before, but at least it was a midpoint. Now there are certain things that you would not even want to entertain a compromise on, right or wrong. There are certain things that are just so abhorrent to you that you don't think that, you know, I don't care about your position. This is so obviously wrong that I can't have a compromise on this with you. I'm sure there are things like that.
Well, what do you mean?
Okay. Would you, if you were in position, would you ever have had a compromise with, say, the Nazis, um, when they were exterminating the Jews? A compromise where they still get to kill some Jews in gas chambers, and you know, in exchange for some other thing. Would there ever be a time where we would make that kind of compromise?
I find that, no offense, I find that a ridiculous argument, dude. That I think the answer would be an unequivocal no. We should not compromise for
Exactly.
that. That I
Exactly.
find that very how would you put it? Um, I can't think of the word right now, but I think that's a ridiculous argument because those
No,
human
it's
beings are already alive, they're already existing, they're already on the planet, they're already, you know, they're already in society, right? These are really well known facts,
okay. So
and
so
and the
so that
problem that we're having is that, you know, an unborn fetus is unborn. It's not even here yet, right? And there's a period of, even in the medical industry, they call it a period of viability, right? So I mean
that's the
that's
basis for your finding
like,
it ridiculous.
well, no, I find it ridiculous. Well, yeah, I find it ridiculous that we're arguing the difference between people who are here living currently. They have lives, they have jobs, they have kids. You know, they have all these things, but we're conflating that with a fetus. Like I don't see the argument.
It's not that it's hyperbolic. It's not that it.
Yeah, hyperbolic. That's word I was looking for. So I can't hear you, Charles. I think you broke up a little bit there. I'm not hearing anything that you're saying. Uh, yeah, still not hearing you. I hope you don't get disconnected. Of course, I'll hang out until you come back in, but I'm not hearing anything. So I will just talk. Let's see here. From the pro life position, the things that, there was a video made, the silent scream, and it was a an ultrasound image of a fetus being aborted, and it was the most horrifying and gruesome thing I've ever fucking seen. And from that point forward, I was always pro life. Um, but I do have libertarian leanings, which is, I realize that my rights only extend to me. They don't extend, you know, I can't violate someone else's rights purely because I don't like what they're doing. Like, that's not how this works. That's not how a society works, right? We function based off of the social construct or contract where I agree. So, are you back, Charles?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, I don't know what happened. So, go ahead
Yeah,
and start off where you left off. I don't know where you were going.
yeah. So I was saying, so your point of contention is that these are not already existing. And I also find that to be sort of lacking in merit because uh, now we have to define what exactly is life, what exactly is living. You understand?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
consider and I consider the fetus at the point of conception as something which is living already. So that can also apply to them, because when you say what is life, what are the characteristics of life? If we want to look at the an objective definition of life, uh, there are certain characteristics that are shared across living things. For example, one, they
Mhm.
can reproduce; two, they can move, they can respire, um, they can basically those things, and that is something that is shared across all living things. And the fetus can do all of those things. The fetus respires, it reproduces, it moves, it has all those characteristics of life. So um, on
Well,
that
fetus doesn't
basis,
reproduce.
it does reproduce. What is reproduction?
Reproduce what?
It reproduces itself.
It's capable of reproduction later on in life, but not at that
No,
point.
no. Okay, now let me explain what reproduction is to you.
Yeah, yeah, please
Reproduction
do.
is reproduction is the produce is kind of a process of replication.
Oh,
Cellular
cell division.
cellular replication. So the fetus, at the point, in fact, at the point of conception, once the egg fuses with the sperm, what happens is that there's rapid cellular reproduction at that point in
Right.
time. So there's rapid cellular division, and then it starts before all the cells start differentiating into the
Mm,
different organs of the body. So that is what we consider reproduction, at least in
yeah.
science. So the fetus
So
definitely reproduces.
so let me touch on something really quick here before I forget it. So part of the
Yeah.
problem with not having a federalized ruling on abortion, right, is
Mhm.
that there's some states that have one set of standards and another state that has another set of standards, right? So if
Mm.
we look at some states like Texas, it was like or what, I can't remember what the other state was. There was a state that was like absolutely brutal. It's like even if the fetus self-aborted, you could still be prosecuted. Like that's just wrong on so many levels, right? The Texas abortion ban does not include rape or incest, which that should. You should not have to carry your rapist's child. You should not have to carry your uncle's child, right? Or whoever's child. That's just cruel and unusual punishment to force someone to do that. So there has to be certain times when it's legally and morally and ethically right to do. Okay, we cannot force people to do those kind of things. And so that's kind of where my position is and Roe versus Wade, actually the trimester system, I think it worked. I think it worked on a couple of different levels, which is the first trimester, you were allowed to, a woman was allowed to abort for no reason. Second trimester, the life of the mother had to be at risk, and then they could abort. But during the third trimester, you couldn't abort, like, period. Now, there were some states that were trying to push that boundary ridiculously, right up to the point of birth, which is stupid, and I would never, ever, ever, ever support that or advocate that at all. Period. Right. But like all societies, you've got a sect that wants to take things to the absolute stupid extreme, and that's being misrepresented to the point where everybody thinks that every single leftist, including myself, thinks that that kind of an abortion would be a good thing. It's like, no, screw you. That is not okay. Right. So we also do have another system here in place that we're not talking about, which is the media and how it misrepresents, a very small minority of a large group of people, being lefties, right? Saying that we all believe that abortion should be allowed up to 9 months. It's like, come on. It's not even remotely true. I mean, most of the lefties I know completely are fine with the way that Roe versus Wade was decided originally, is the trimester rule. We were all perfectly fine with that. There was a very, very small group of people that weren't.
Okay. So Steve, I do agree with you that there are some people who might be militant on this, and there are some laws that may be unfair, especially with the rape and incest stuff. I think that's pushing it. Um, I think
I don't.
that is where the conversation needs to be had. I mean, forcing someone to carry the child of a rapist and all that. That's where the conversation needs to be had. Um, but on the other
Well,
hand,
there was an
on the,
example in Nigeria, like your own country. There was a woman who was
mm,
claiming that she was a lesbian, right?
mm,
Well, this guy decided that he was going to screw the lesbian out of her. Well, he raped her. He raped her, got her pregnant, and to boot, gave her AIDS.
that's
Right?
horrible.
That is horrible, right? That's one of the worst. Obviously, that's not going to be in every situation scenario, right? But that's
Mm.
when we completely cut off the conversation from that perspective, we are doing ourselves a disjustice or an injustice, that we don't even understand the repercussions that will come after that. Does that make sense? Like there has to be some
Sure,
wiggle room. There has to be some
sure.
like some dialogue. Now, the pro life part of me agrees with a lot of what you're saying. It's like if you bone, right, and you get pregnant and you're being irresponsible, sorry, tough luck, you don't get to abort. Like I want to agree with you on that. And I do agree with you on that. But the problem is that just because I agree or disagree with you on something still does not inform my right to control what you can do with your body. That's the problem that I'm trying to express to people, is that you don't have to like abortion at all, right? But you also at the same time cannot expect that your belief needs to extend into somebody else's personal rights and belief systems as well.
Oh, right, Steve. Yeah, I think we agree on that. I agree, like I stated earlier, I agree people can do whatever the hell they want with their body, but I do not consider pregnancy as being a woman's body alone because another being is involved. So, my body, my choice at that point is no longer applicable. Now, you talked about certain states having certain laws that are ridiculous. I agree that ridiculous laws like forcing someone to carry the child of a rapist should be struck down. It doesn't make any sense. But also, um, I think the striking of the Roe versus Wade, I think is a good thing because this is not saying abortion is now illegal in the US. This is just saying let states decide. So go hash it out on your
Mhm.
on your, on your state's
Yeah,
legislatures. You understand? Go hash it
right,
out there, which is something that, in terms of gun control and so many other things, many Americans, including yourself, advocate for. You do not want the federal government to mandate certain things to
right,
states. So I
right,
don't see why this is such a big issue. This isn't even a win for conservatives because right now it's done nothing for conservatives for the conservative position. It's just returned that
right.
right back to states,
So here's the problem
which
with that.
which I think is a fantastic thing.
Here's the problem with that. The federal
Let me know
government's
your thoughts.
responsibility is to protect the rights of Americans, not to infringe upon them and not to tell them that they have them or don't have them. The federal government's responsibility, period, is to protect the rights that we have, right? And Roe versus Wade established the right of a woman to her own reproductive rights. Well, what happens now is that when you disseminate that to the states are not going to honor that, right? Because they don't see it as an inalienable human right to your own body. So you're going to have states that are going to be absolutely screwed, much like we have with the gun control laws, right? Utah is very gun friendly. Hawaii is horrible. You can't even own a gun there, right? In some states, it's worse in the states than it is in Canada. That's hard to believe, but it's true, right? So you have some states that have no problem taking rights away when their full on sole responsibility is to protect the rights of the citizens of that state. But you don't have that happening. And that's a big concern that I have with Roe versus Wade, is you've now got states that are playing a moral authority in the lives of the people that they govern. And I find that super, super sketchy, super serious. Like, I don't like it. Don't like it at all.
Well, um, I think this is a better compromise than striking abortion totally, which is an untenable position. I think it's a
Yeah.
better compromise because many other things in the US are already being pushed to the states already. So why not one more? I mean, if gun laws and the rest, yeah, if gun laws are being pushed to the states, because if you want to look at guns in the first place, the Second Amendment guarantees the right to for citizens to, self-defense, to own firearms and all that, then it should be illegal. That is a right. That is a right that was clearly stated. This is not a right that was
Right.
gotten by penumbra or whatever
Right.
thing. You
Penumbra and
understand?
emanations. It was clearly
Exactly.
written.
It was clearly written. Yet the Supreme Court can still push this to states and say, you know what, this is not our business. Go deal with it at the state level. Not to talk of something that wasn't even written in the Constitution in the first place. So
Right.
I this is very fine. It's very fine. Go deal with it at the state level. So let there be more engagement with politics at the state level. Elect politicians that are favorable to your cause, make legislation that is favorable to your cause, and you can actually get things working at the state level than just having the federal government hand down things to you. That is the way I
Yeah.
see it. So I don't see it as a this is the end of the world.
Well,
Like I was looking at one video on
yeah.
Twitter today that was calling for violence, like that she's advocating for violence because of this. Like, come on, how,
Yeah.
why?
Violence is not and has not ever been a solution for this problem. The reason are massive. For one thing, okay, so you're going to be violent. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be violent too, right? And that doesn't do anything but propagate a larger freaking problem. Like we should be in that position now in the 21st century that violence is uh, we should hate and abhor violence at this stage in human existence. Like we should not be advocating violence except for in the most extreme circumstances, like I don't know, the killing of 6 million Jews. You know what I mean? So like advocating violence for this, like I understand their argument and I understand their concerns and I understand their desires, but this is not the way to solve the problem, because now all you've done is you've solidified your opposition against you, because they know from now on they will always be violent. So I am going to match violence with violence. I am going to match effort with effort. I'm going to match force with force. Now you have a stalemate. Congratulations. You just screwed everybody by being violent. Way to go. Now this is a problem that's never going to be solved, because the other side will never hear our argument. We'll
Yep.
never be able to make a foothold. It takes calm, rational, intelligent, educated minds to have good debates about these things, figure out where we can compromise, right? And where we can, because compromising never is going to make anybody happy, right? Compromise never makes anybody happy. And I'll give you this example, and it's a funny example, but it's one that my friend Rick tells me all the time. It's like, let's say that you want to have sex with your wife 5 times a week, but she only wants to have it 2, right? So you compromise and you say, okay, we'll have sex 4 times a week. Okay. You're unhappy because you're not getting enough, and she's unhappy because she's giving it way too much. Neither one of you are happy, right? Compromise is not there to make people happy. Compromise is there to establish a rule in society that we can at least live by, right? That we can at least support, in the sense that we are making the largest majority of people happiest. You're never going to make anybody, and you're not going to make everybody happy all the time. It's unfortunate, but it's a true fact of life. And that's the problem. Is I feel like this decision with Roe v. Wade is cutting that tie between that idea, right? It's kind of cutting the knot there, where we can no longer have that conversation, because it's become such a political conversation now that we can't even have a conversation, because I don't know. It's hard. Maybe Cody will have a better way of explaining this. I always love listening to Cody. So Cody, I give my mic time to you.
Yeah, Cody, welcome to conversation.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
we
we can
can.
hear you, Cody.
Okay, then. So I'll start off by talking about my evolution and my opinions on things, and say that if I were 15 years old again, I probably would have been happy about this ruling, because I was raised a very conservative Christian and was very conservative for most of my life. I would have been happy. Somebody else came in.
No, you're still good, Cody. We can still hear you.
Go ahead,
Okay
Cody.
then. Well, I remember thinking when I was about 15 years old that if I got older and was in positions of power, I would try to find a way in order to make other people live as Christ like as possible, even if they didn't want to, because in that way I would be saving their souls. And so I thought that the best thing would be do was to manipulate the law so that people would be as incapable of committing sinful actions as I believe them as possible. And see, growing up now and having changed my minds, I see that's basically what the Republican Party and a lot of Christians are doing. They are committing a conspiracy in order to manipulate the law, legal system, economics in general, in order to force people to live by their moral standards. In a way, they're trying to make everyone a clockwork orange. And I'm sad to see people doing that still when I came to realize how wrong that was.
I majoritively agree with what Cody is saying there.
All right. So we have a Zachariah. I'll respond to Cody later, but we have Zachariah Hayes here. Zachariah Hayes. Hey, welcome, Zachariah. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Charles. It's an honor to be speaking to you.
Nice to meet you, Zachariah.
Nice to meet you too, sir. It's an honor to speak to you as well. I think you have some interesting points. I saw the debate that you had with Charles with the science and religion. And let me just start off with saying, I'm a very complex man, very complex. The reason why I started getting into this channel is because, whether you want to believe it or not, I'm not here to convince you of anything. But these 2 eyes have seen so much. And the last thing I can't stand is any type of fucking victimization. Wait, can I curse? Can I curse, Charles?
Yeah, sure.
I already have. So
Charles, can I curse?
You can. Go ahead.
Your signal's kind of bad though, Zachariah. I don't know if you've got a better place in your house that you can go, or you can try cutting off your camera, and that might help us here, because you're kind of cutting in and out really bad.
What about now? Is it better now?
No, it's better now. Yeah.
It's better now. It's better.
Okay. Let me know if it starts acting up again, please. Okay.
Will do.
Yeah, I don't like any type of victimization. I don't like any type of, just bitch behavior. I didn't come up from that standard. My mom died when I was 10 years old from breast cancer. Yeah, when I was 10 years old from breast cancer, and
my condolences.
No reason to have your condolences, it's just I was exposed to being a man at an extremely young age, and I actually grew up fighting a lot. I hate to say it, and hate to also mention this, my dad grew up fighting a lot when he was a kid. Part of the reason, or most of the reason, fucking majority of the reason why he got into fights is because, he's a light-skinned black man. And a lot of people, if you grew up in the 70s or if you grew up in the 80s, that within black culture, there was a light skin complex, like if you were a light skinned black person, specifically a light skinned black man, like people would try to emasculate you, or people would try to, think that you're inferior, like you couldn't defend yourself. And my father had to get into a lot of fights because of that, so it's just, wait, I heard you talking about violence. And again, I'm a pacifist at heart. I don't ever try to be the antagonist in any type of situation. But I've just noticed within the human animal archetype that we all possess, this is how it's going to go, whether you want to accept it or not. I'm not here to convince you. There's going to be people who are existing. There's going to be people who die. I've been in a near-death situation, and it was literally a situation. Okay, it's either I die or he dies, because he's not going to stop. No matter how much convincing I try to, no matter how much talking I try to tell him, no matter how many words I try to, convey to his subconscious to leave me alone. I've been in situations like that. I know what real life is about, but again, I can only speak from my experiences. This is just a life that I've lived, and even my eating habits. I'm a vegan. And here's the thing, right? Now, I typically do not get along with a lot of vegans and vegetarians, right? Because I'm a very spiritually inclined person. I'm vegan to connect to God. But like what Venera Cody just mentioned with the Christians and the Republicans, like imposing their moral compass onto onto the masses. I feel as if the vegans and the vegetarians, are improving. I mean, are imposing their moral compass onto the masses as well. And whether you're a scientist or whether you're a religious based person, I think every individual should embrace their own should embrace their own individual identity. But you can't do like I feel like it's kind of arrogant of me to go around and define what morality is. I can only define what my subjective interpretation of what morality is. And I'm sure everybody in this chat room, just people all across the world, we were just all raised differently. I wouldn't expect a
Mhm.
24-year-old to, you know, eat at 12 p.m., 8 p.m., and drink a gallon of water a day, be vegan, just work and like I've been living by myself since I was 21 years old. Since I was 21, like I didn't finish high school when I dropped out when I was 17, but I've been working since I was 17 years old. I've always had a job. I've always had my own, so that's why it's always been hard for me to connect with people because when they hear me talk, I've been getting this a lot. I've gotten this a lot, like my whole entire life. They either think I'm gay or they either, think that I'm soft with the way I talk. And it led to a lot of fights, some, minor, some severe. But again, I was just raised differently. My dad taught me, listen, I don't give a fuck who the fuck thinks that you're anything. You stand up for what the fuck you want. You stand up for yourself. If they have a fucking problem, they punch me in their fucking mouth. That's the only way you're going to get your point across. But again, that's just how I was raised. I can't speak from how everybody else is raised. And even with race, right? Let me tell you something. I've seen so much in my life. My uncle Mark Breland trained Deontay Wilder for 12 years. And after what that son of a bitch did after he lost to Tyson Fury, he couldn't take a fucking loss. That changed my whole perspective of race. So when anyone mentions race to me, I'll tell them this. Listen, you call yourself a black man, you call yourself a white man, you call yourself an Asian man. If you're really a fucking man, you'll fight for what the fuck you want. But as a man, I'm not going to do any fucking talking, nor am I going to try to convince anybody to try to be my friend or ally. If you're white, there's no such thing as racism in my world. You just don't like, I cannot convince a white person to like me because I'm a brown skinned man. If you don't, congratulations to you. All I ask for you to do is just don't touch me because if we fight, it isn't going to be on a race level. I don't give a fuck about the race. I'll just have to fight you because I need to defend myself. But I'm just sick and tired of the social justice warriors. I'm sick and fucking tired of just all of these people trying to convince, like you have all of this shit at these Ivy League schools, like trying to convince people on why diversity is so important. Half of you motherfuckers don't even want these fucking black people around. So it's like, I look at it like this. Just be upfront with what you want. Because I just look at when I hear you guys talk, I just in my mind, I mean, sometimes I'll say it, but in my mind, I'm like, all you fucks are liars. Oh, I could just tell that a lot of men just didn't have you guys didn't have fights when you were coming up. You guys used to get the shit smacked out of you. It's like you guys are just pussy, and it's like you guys are liars as well. I think a lot of white liberals are just liars. I just think a lot of these black extremists, you guys are just fucking liars, and no one talks about the light skin complex that was going on in the 70s and the 80s. Even my grandfather, he was lighter than my if you look at my grandfather right now, Steve, no bullshit. Only difference is the only difference you have between the only difference you have between my grandfather yourself is just your hair. It just a little bit your facial features, almost as light as you.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, served in the military. He has a flag right there. I have the flag right there, and same protocol was going on for him. A lot of people thought that he was inferior. A lot of people thought that he was going to take shit, and he said, "Fuck that." Like, and that's what I'm saying. I used to box. I've trained with. I've done Navy SEAL type training. Exposed myself to ice baths and cold exposure. And let me tell you something. I've seen all races of people fight. I've seen the whites fight. I've seen the fucking Croatians fight. I've seen Africans fight. I've seen people of all different races and ethnic backgrounds fight, you know? And it's just, instead of conveying all of us to be with one another, why don't we just have another civil war? I think that's the only solution to this, right? Because I'm not going out of my way to convince another person outside of my race, or even a person within my race, to be with me, or be an ally. It's either you like me or you don't. I can't convince you to accept my image, you know. So that's just my stance and everything, you know. If you have anyone who loves to follow on,
Yeah.
go ahead. You know?
I got something to say to that. I think you've lived a life that is full of really great character building experiences. You know, I grew up being bullied, so I got in fights a lot, and so I can identify with your perspective in the sense that, you know, when you're in a fight, there's only two outcomes: either you win or you lose, right? Life gets really fucking simple really fucking quick. You know what I mean? Here's the problem that happens after the fight's done, right? Did you do anything to improve anything? Probably not, right? Mm-hmm. Dude still probably hates your guts. You probably still hate his guts. Nothing was really solved except for you kicked his ass today. He might come back and kick your ass tomorrow, right? So nothing really changed. So really, I think, you know, the thing that kind of changed in my mind as I got older was I began to look at trying to convince you, because we can only make someone do something one of two ways: one by coercion, one by force, mm-hmm. right? I consider it's not hard for me to beat your ass, right? Right. But it is definitely difficult for me to convince you of something that you don't want to do. Mm-hmm. I find that an intellectual challenge that I want to do, right? I am more than the sum of my knuckles in that sense, right? So I want to learn how to be able to have complex, intelligent conversations and try to at least bring the peg one step closer to my beliefs, you know, from where someone is, one step closer to my belief, right? And as we do that, and we progressively do that with the people around us, we begin to create a society that is a lot more tighter, a lot more together. We are comfortable having difficult conversations. We're comfortable being able to give people an argument that is valid, right? And not simply being like so staunchly stonewalled that we can't give someone else a good, valid argument. Mm-hmm. You know, because like I've told Charles, like, he's made several really fantastic arguments today, arguments that I'm not going to argue against because I also believe in them. Plus, they're also rationally reasonable. Mm-hmm. But if you notice, it's kind of like a give and take. You trying to convince someone of something. The problem is that the goal for many people is to win. The goal is not to win. The goal is to learn, mm-hmm. right? The goal is to learn, how do you think about things? Because I can't defeat you until I know how you think. Uh-huh. You see what I'm saying? And so I want to get to know how you feel about things so that I can either learn to agree, you know, I want to either learn to love you or I want to learn to defeat you. and the thing is that during, like, if I want to beat you, the problem is that as I get to know you, I tend to get to love you. Right. So the whole dynamic changes in a way where now I'm speaking to you as a human being, not as a black man. Mm-hmm. Right. Because we're more human than we are our skin color. Mm-hmm. And I'm literally published on that exact topic of treating people differently because of their race. Mm-hmm. And so I find it really fascinating where you're coming from, because I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And it sounds like you're a person of integrity, and you demand integrity from others because you say, I'm tired of them lying all the damn time, right?
I mean, oh, Steve, didn't mean to cut you off. Continue.
No, I'm just saying you seem like the kind of person that demands integrity in your life, because you're saying I'm sick and tired of these people lying. I'm sick and tired of these people not having the integrity to admit when they're wrong. I'm sick and tired of these people not having the integrity to admit when something is blatantly wrong that they've said they disagree with, but now all of a sudden they agree with it because it's convenient, right? So I can immediately tell that you're a person of integrity, like really, really good, high integrity, probably higher than my own.
Right. Okay. My dad had me exposed to fighting at a very young age. But let me tell you something, all right? I come from I come from a very educated family. I'm not going to get into details because I know I come from an educated family. That's not the point, right? You see, I don't know if it's what I've realized about the human animal archetype that we all possess, right? Like I've met some really, really smart people in my life. And sometimes when you're trying to convey something to a specific individual, I don't think that it's ignorance from their end. I really just feel like they don't have the interest because when you're ignorant, you don't know. But ignorance can also mean you don't have the ability to know. And I honestly feel like as an adult, you know what's out here, right? So why am I conveying something to someone who just doesn't have an interest, right? If you don't have an interest to be nonviolent, how can I convince you like towards that goal? I've been in situations where, okay, like I've spoken for hours. I've asked that specific person, okay, what is the outcome going to be from you resorting to this plan that you have? Like the same questions and the same amount of curiosity that you have, right? Like, what's the end goal? And a person like myself loves to learn. A person like myself, just I'm always curious. But as a man, I honestly realized some people just don't have a fucking interest to learn. And right, and then when you realize that you have to exist. I mean, I don't know about you, gentlemen, but I can only speak for myself. I had to exist in a survival mode ever since I was a little boy
Wow.
because I've tried my best for so long to convince people you don't have to do it this way. Like, can I give you an example, please? Like, I was at this restaurant. I was picking up food not too long ago, right? I'm speaking to this beautiful woman, of course, liked her a lot. I see some fucking ass clown who works at the restaurant. Like he's making fun of me in front of this girl, right? And I told this guy, sir, like, can you please stop doing that? I'm speaking to a woman right now. Please, like that, you're being very inappropriate. Told him like at least 10 times. He just kept on going and kept on going and kept on going. And then when he saw that I started getting aggressive, he just stopped. You understand what I'm saying? It's like you don't want problems. I don't want any trouble, but these people don't have an interest to be pacifists. It's like the only option you just have. I mean, I can speak from my experience is to just go off. And I hate feeling like I have to resort to that.
All right. So
You
so
know?
so let me get in at this point. Yeah, Zachariah, really appreciate you joining the stream today, and you seem to have very good insights on some things, and your experiences are very, very enriching. In fact, when you were talking about the woke stuff, I love a good rant against wokeness. When you were talking about uh, that these liberals, they don't care, they don't really care. They just want some brownie points. They just want some social points, and that's all they really care about. That's true. Now, the part where I would kind of disagree with you is the part of let's just have a civil war and all that. I mean, war is a bad thing. It really is a bad
Yeah,
thing.
it is a
I
bad
don't
thing.
think.
I agree with you. I do.
I don't.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. I do. I think I'm trying to cut you off. I think war. See, listen, I'm like I don't consider myself a Rastafarian, but there's a specific reason why I'm vegan, because I practice that diet to connect to God, not the Rastafarians in the Western world, but the Rastafarians who live in Shashamane, Ethiopia. I'm sure that you're familiar with Shashamane, Ethiopia, Charles, because you're from Nigeria, and that's in Africa, right? I love the holistic way of I love the holistic approach they have towards stuff. You know, they use the marijuana to connect to God. They don't want to kill animals. Like me, like I shoot guns, but I'll never shoot an animal only because for spiritual purposes. You know, like I think war is really a fucked up thing. You look at history, you look at all of these deaths that has happened. It's horrible, but I know, I can only speak for myself. Sometimes, if you don't get violent, they'll get violent with you, and you may die. But again, I can only speak for my
Yeah, yeah,
experience. I
yeah,
can only speak
yeah,
from the
yeah,
history
yeah.
that I've been exposed to.
So Zachariah,
I think it's horrible.
do you have an opinion on the Supreme Court's ruling on Roe v. Wade? Do you have an opinion on that?
Can I be can I be honest with you, Charles?
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
hopefully.
sure.
Or like probably like 3 hours ago was the first time I heard about it because I'm not really into politics. But I I don't know much about it. Can you just get? I really don't know much about it only because I don't really get into politics like that. You know, can you just give me a little insight? Whether Steve or Charles, like, can you guys just let me
Yeah.
know?
Charles, do you want me to do that?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. So the Supreme Court of the United States made it decided today to overturn Roe versus Wade, which was the quintessential classic ruling on abortion in the United States. Roe versus Wade it decided on the trimester system. So the first trimester you could abort if you wanted to. That was roughly 15 to 20 weeks. The second trimester, the woman's health had to be at risk to be able to abort, and then by the third, it didn't matter. The baby was going to get born whether you die as the mother or not, right? So that set up the framework for that, as well as the privacy argument. The privacy argument being a woman has a right under the laws, under the rights of privacy, to gain whatever health care that they deem fit for their bodies. Today or yesterday, they decided to overturn that, and Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which were two of the most major influential case law for abortion rights. We don't know what's going to happen now, because now what they've done is that instead of it being a federally protected right, it is now up to the states to enforce states' rights, and that's where we're at. That's basically like the bare bones of it.
Right.
And I should add, we could go on for hours and days on, what is a baby and what is life and what is a fetus and what is viability. But that's, Charles and I kind of got off into a tangent there, but I'm curious about how you feel about the argument, what your feelings are about abortion itself. I mean, we've only got a little bit of time left, but I'm curious on what, and I think Charles is curious on what your feelings are about abortion and about that ruling.
Well, number one, I can only speak for myself. As a man. I mean, again, it's just how I feel. If you're a man enough to have sex, you should be man enough to take care of the kid, right? I mean, I don't. But again, I don't think you're wrong for getting an abortion. Like my dad, right? One of my dad's best friends, his daughter was born with Down syndrome, right? So you have situations where you'll question, okay, like before the baby is born, you can find out like which specific like problem they may have, and you may start to question, okay, like, do I want to put my child in this kind of harsh world so they can like, if they aren't going to have the faculties correct, do I want to put them in that? So I can't. With the abortion, that's always going to be a sensitive topic, because again,
Right.
I take pride in being a great dad, taking care of your children, but at the same time, I understand that shit happens in life. I've experienced it at a young age with my mom's passing. And you may have parents who, it's not that they're being cowards, but they might not want their child to experience life, at their best capacity. So that's always going to be sensitive. And you know, so basically, women, they lost their rights, from they lost their rights from receiving protection, like from abortion, is what you're telling me, correct?
Right. Yeah, they had
Right.
protections, federal protections, and now they're gone.
Right. But see, I think if you are going to receive an abortion, right? No, see, I live life fair. I judge fairly. If you are going to receive an abortion, just ask yourself, is it the best decision? I wouldn't want a man or a woman to agree with abortion just because they're too fucking lazy to take care of a child, right? I would never advocate for that. But at the same time, I understand that you have life is just so complex, right? And another thing as well. I also know a gentleman who died from ALS a couple of years ago. But the thing is, with his situation, his brother was diagnosed with it. His uncle was diagnosed with it as well, right? So and so you'll have situations where you'll have certain like genetic, like mutations in the family, and you might have a person like himself or somebody in that similar situation who has ALS or something, and the mom, he has sex with a woman, she ends up getting pregnant, but she starts to question, okay, like if this is a genetic, if this illness is, if this illness is genetic based, right? Do I want my child to be born and they may have a short life expectancy, right? So, but the abortion is always going to be sensitive because everyone's situation is always going to be different,
So it should be a nuanced conversation.
Wow, wow.
always
This
it's always
this
going
is
it's always going to be different because again, right? Like again, I want 5 kids, I want 6, 7 kids, right? But that, but again, it's how I was raised. But you might have someone else, who they only want one, but they might feel like, oh, because of the family situation, because of the genetic based illness, and my like, you have to want to be a parent, right? And I think I learned that from my dad's friend with his daughter that was born with Down syndrome. Like he figured out she went to like the best private school in America. So I honestly feel like as a parent, if you really want to figure out how to work around these situation, I honestly feel like you can. My dad was 39 years old when my mom passed away, and he had to raise 3 children by himself. Of course, he had his extended family, but he was the main one that was responsible. Like it's always going to be complex. Everyone's situation is going to be different. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Charles, what
all
were you going to say?
right. Yeah, so I really want to appreciate the nuance that Zachariah has brought to this conversation, and I wish that more
Absolutely.
people would think like this. I mean, see the way he was able to balance it. First of all, he started out with, if you are responsible, if you're old enough to have sex, then you should be responsible enough to want to take care of the kid that comes from it. And then he lays out the other extenuating circumstances that might necessitate why someone might want to get an abortion and why it should be possible for such people to have an abortion. And I think that's a very common sense position. You understand? I think that's a balanced position. I think it's a fair position. And I think it's a position that most people are not taking. I think the left and the right, they're just going on the opposite ends of the spectrum. The right wants to say no abortion at all costs, and the left wants to say abortion at all costs for whatever reason, which I think isn't good. I don't think that's a good way of looking at it. So I really, really appreciate the points that Zachariah brought to this conversation. More people should think like this, and I mean, if more people thought like this, I mean, there's so much common sense in what he just said that almost anybody can agree with it and just work with it. You understand? But people are just they're too ideologically possessed. They're too far up the ass of their
Right.
ideology that
Right.
they're not going to see anything outside their position. So Cody is back. Let's just give I have to respond to Cody's first points, but let's just give him some room to talk before I respond to that. So Cody, over to you.
So I made sure to listen to the rest on YouTube that I missed in order to catch up. So I disagree with needing another civil war. I'm not sure of the exact points about that, but I appreciate Zach bringing up the issues of disabilities and the issues that a lot of disabled people have to deal with in the very ableist society that we live in. And that's one of the reasons why I am reluctantly pro-abortion, because, see, I'm afraid that there are not enough accommodations for disabled people in the society we live in, where sadly many disabled people are just doomed to lives of suffering, especially if they're born to families who cannot provide them the accommodations that they need.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. And Charles, the thing that I like of what Zacharias was bringing forward, like he said, is common sense. And I was hoping that I was arguing for that earlier, but maybe I wasn't being clear. My position is that it's a nuanced conversation, and I think the danger is that we get trapped, like you said, within the ideologies that we reside within, and we have a hard time seeing the perspective of other people, and therefore blinds us to any other possible explanations for why we should support something. And I'm with you guys. I think if you're old enough, if I can't even really say that, because there's kids that get pregnant at 13 or 14, right? And it's like, what are they supposed to do?
Steve,
You know what I mean?
I mentioned, can I bring something up?
Yeah, sure.
My dad's best friends, but like I said, and it is true. Hate to say it, men were just built differently back then. My dad was born in 1970. His best friend, one of his best friends, he had his
Hey,
first
now I
kid.
was born in 1977.
But you still grew up in the 70s. You know, it was just different. Everything was just different. One of my
Yeah.
dad's friends, he had his first kid at 14 years old, and he's a scout for the fucking Cleveland Cavaliers now. Like in life as a man, I mean, of course, everyone's situation is going to be different, and that's why the race shit always mind boggles me. Because listen, you call yourself a man, you want whatever you want in life. If you can't get it, just understand that you're the reason why you can't get it. It's not society, it's not white privilege, none of that shit. But again, it's just how I was raised. I know, hate to say it, a lot of fucking blacks are going to disagree with me on that. That's just the way it is. But again, it's just how I was raised and how I was brought up. I was brought up in a different time. My dad was brought up in a different time. That's just the way it is, Just being honest with you.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Good. I agree. I love this guy already, Zachariah. I love the
I
angle
like
of
him too.
the angle of personal responsibility that he's taking. That makes so much fucking sense, because you know, see, everybody deals with issues in life, and at times it weighs us down. At times we get out of it. At times it's nobody's fault. At times it's not even our fault. But the longer we spend trying to look for who to blame, the, the less time we have to actually fix the problem. And I have this quotation, or I have this thought that, look, if you have a problem, and if you haven't done everything you possibly can to solve that problem first before you look for someone to blame it on, then you haven't done anything at all. If you've done
Right.
everything within your power that you possibly could as a human being, and it's still not working, then you can say, you know what, this isn't me. Maybe this is society. Maybe this is that. Maybe this is that. But this is just the fact of life. It's the fact of life that at times people have dealt a bad hand, and it may not be anybody's fault. It may just be
Yeah.
an accident of work. I mean, many people in some parts of Africa, they were dealt a bad hand by fate. They didn't choose to be where. Some people don't have good drinking water. Some people don't have good roads. They don't have access to healthcare or education. It isn't because someone made it so. It was just, circumstances that made them to fall into that situation. So who are they going to blame? They're just going to start blaming anybody who's better than them, who has a better financial situation than them. It doesn't work that way. So I really like the way Zachariah is bringing this personal responsibility
Charles,
into this conversation. Yeah.
Charles, again, this is see, 4 years ago, I was undergoing. Now, some people may consider it depression. Some people may consider it anxiety. Some people may consider it, mental illness. But I don't consider it. I don't consider, and I don't look at what I had going on back then. From those ideologies. But basically, I was on the verge of almost jumping off of the Brooklyn Bridge, right, in 2018. And I wasn't showering for 14 days. I didn't brush my teeth for a month. I'm being transparent with you guys. But something told me, you do this, just remember, you will be the weakest fuck to ever exist. And my dad's been telling me that from the time I was a kid, like, just remember, if you ever kill yourself, I will never host a fucking funeral for you. And I won't tell anybody that you died. So if you want to kill yourself and be a little sorry fuck, go the fuck ahead. Like I said, my dad was just raised different. After that, a lot of stuff has happened. I noticed within the past 4 years, I've been in a lot of situations. I was in a very big life-threatening situation. And like I said, it was either I was going to take him out or he was going to take me out. And some people may consider that situation to be fate. Oh, he's just a guy. He's trying to attack you. But, if you raise my father, he'll tell you, listen, you can't fucking figure it out. You're just not fucking man enough. That's just the way it is. So I understand that we all have situations. You all have problems in life. But like my dad has been telling me from the time I was a little boy, in life, no one's going to give you anything. And you have to fight for your respect. You have to fight for honor. You have to fight for integrity. And if you can't figure out anything as a man, just remember the only person you can blame is yourself. Because my dad had every fucking reason in the book to not take care of his children. 13 years ago, my mom died. But he still figured it out. And he knows a lot of dads who dealt with similar situations, but they were still too pussy enough to own up to life. So that's just how I look at it. Like, you can have every situation coming at you. If you do not figure it out, you'll die, according to my father. But again, I was raised getting ass whoopings for being a disrespectful piece of shit to other adults. I was raised by having my hands, by me raising my arms and my father whooping me for being a disrespectful piece of fuck. But again, it's just how I was raised. And I understand that a lot of people just weren't raised like that. But my mom made a promise. My dad made a promise to my mom her last days. My kids are going to be all right. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that they are men. And he did that. Now, some people may consider it the wrong way. Some people may consider it the unorthodox way. Listen, I'm alive. I have my own place. I'm an entrepreneur today. That's just how my life played out.
Right. Well, just something that you touched on there was that when you're facing a certain situation, it doesn't matter how you got there. It doesn't matter how it started. What matters is how it's going to finish, right? That's all that matters in that point. People who haven't been in a fight, who haven't been in a firefight, who haven't been in any kind of life or death situation, they don't understand that perception, right? When you're faced with that situation in real life, in real time, you don't give a shit about how you got there. Right. I'll think about that later. Right now, I need to figure out how I'm going to stay alive through this whole thing. Right. And that brings a very, very distinct perception with it. And that's what I think you're talking to, if I'm catching you right.
Of course.
So, Charles, did you want to go on, or are you fine with going on, or do you want to end it now, or because I know we're hitting that 2 hour.
So let's just we're gonna end shortly. So we'll just circle back to both points. We missed one of the points we were supposed to talk about, but no worries, talk about it some other time. Now,
Yeah.
Zeleki, he's tackling me. He said Africans or adults with bad luck or not having good road, drinking water. Are you for real? Not bad government. Okay, now this will be my response to that. I didn't say bad luck anyway. I said maybe dealt a bad hand. Yes. See, the bad government thing goes without saying. It goes without saying that those things resulted from bad government and all that. But you being born into that situation wasn't anybody's fault. You didn't choose it. It just happened to you. You just happened to be born into a place where the government is fucked up.
You still got to survive.
You still have to survive. Somehow,
it out,
you get it. You still have to survive.
I think there's a disconnect here between ideas of individualism and collectivism. I think you guys are very much advocating for individualism to a high degree. I think you're ignoring that perhaps they're inferring that a greater form of collectivism will be helpful if those with the power to fix roads or provide fresh water to others would take up that responsibility. And that's why I don't fully agree with individualism, because I know that we human beings are social animals and that we need each other to survive. And I know that I wouldn't have gotten half of the good things that I have in my life if it wasn't for other people.
Right.
Yeah,
Uh,
It's
uh,
let's see.
Cody,
Let's see. Let's see.
I agree. I agree with that. I agree that there are some things that goes beyond the individual. You understand? But just as those things go beyond the individual, there is really nothing the individual can do about it because it goes beyond him. But there are some things that he can do that is within his sphere of influence. Of
Yes,
course,
I agree with being pragmatic about caring for your own needs, given the situation you
Mm.
find yourself in. I'm also in favor of helping to network with others in order to change the situation that you and others are in order to benefit yourself and others.
What if the government, because the government is out of your control, what if they decide to not do anything and there is nothing you can do about their decision? What happens?
Well, I
Life still
understand the
goes
issue
on.
of having to give in to defeatism. I also understand that that's why you need to network with more people because of their strength in numbers.
Well, okay, now if we wanted to bring it back to Africa and then look at the realities of the politics in Africa, you will see that at times there is very little even the people themselves can do. Take my country for example. We have this absolute disaster of a president who is about leaving, is about to be replaced
Yeah.
by another disaster of a president who has come out
man.
publicly to say that he's going to be president whether or not, that he's ready to fight everybody, he's ready to do this, ready to do that to get the power. You understand? And you can already see the kind of political calculations they are making to make sure that this person gets into power. Now, there is very
Yeah, that's not
little.
good.
It's
That's
not.
not
It's not
good,
good.
Charles.
It's not good. There is very little that I can do about that. You understand? I can try and I can try and do my basic duty of voting and the rest, but it doesn't mean they're not still going to snatch ballot boxes. It doesn't mean they're not going to do their rigging and all that. But my life continues. If it gets better, good. It's good for everyone. But if it doesn't get better, my life continues. I'll still have to continue living. So that's the point I was looking at it from. That definitely there are some things that are beyond the individual, but at
Yeah.
times we want to abrogate our personal responsibilities and take on something that is beyond us. It's just is a form of escapism at times. Some of these big social issues is just form of escapism. Yeah.
Well,
Okay, I recommend not giving it into defeatism.
I want to kind of go off of what Cody there said. As a libertarian, my biggest concern is the individual, right? It's like, what is the individual doing? Individual rights, individual property, right? I'm really big on the individual because what happens is when the individual is allowed to be an individual in their own right, what we find is that, and what we hope and find is that when that individual then sees a problem, he goes out and gets other individuals. So like what you could do, Charles, as an individual is you could say, hey, I'm forming a security system where we go to the ballot boxes and we make sure that those ballot boxes are safe, right? You can do that as individuals living within a society. And I think that's the problem that I see with both right and left is they want to make all of us the same, right? I don't want to be the same as you.
And that's what I'm saying. That's
Right.
why I say if this continues to happen, it's either, like I said, the civil war is just going to happen, or we're going to have another January 6th, 2021, but 100 times more. That's because you see every individual that is existing in this earth. I don't give a fuck what you tell. We're all different. When you look at me, when you look at my brother, you guys would ever meet us in person. Within the first couple of seconds, you're going to say, these motherfuckers, your brothers? It's just but the left, but I noticed the imposing comes. I mean, it comes from both sides, but what it amazes me that the left just wants everybody to just agree with what they're projecting. I mean, of course, the right does it as well, but like gun rights, you know, this situation, I just noticed like you just have grown adults who just don't want to look in the mirror and take any type of responsibility for shit. Because like when a gun shooting happens, right? Just like we've had a lot of you know gun shootings within the past couple of months, specifically within the past month and a half or two, right? Like you cannot take away everyone else's gun rights because you have an irresponsible piece of shit that decided to use the gun in an irresponsible manner. Because let me tell you something, like a person who my great grandmother lives in London. You guys want to talk about shootings in America? Have you been to fucking London, mate? You know how many stabbings
Bunch of
that happened
knifings.
in London? No, I'm dead ass serious. You know how many
I
stabbings
know.
in London? So it's like whether you have the gun or whether you don't have the gun, people are still going to have crime. Like that's inevitable.
Yeah.
You know, so I just
I
know
think
that.
they I
Right,
think they actually had less shootings than they do stabbings now,
right.
which is sad. It's so sad.
A lot of stabbings, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Can I
So
go
we
back
have
and
to.
speak to Steve's point earlier?
Yeah, yeah. So after
Um,
Cody, then we'll just take our closing statements and we'll be done.
yeah. See, Steve's point about focusing on the individual, and whatnot. That's what I would advocate for. I'm trying to think of a better way to put it, but cultural individualism and more material collectivism. I believe that people's self expression and personal beliefs and hypotheticals they believe in should be respected for every individual, but we should all work together in sharing resources for others' well being. I remember back when
Absolutely.
I had to care for my father when he had a stroke. I had come to disagree with almost everything he had raised me to believe in, but I still cared about his well being and was willing to put in time and resources for that well-being. So I think
Yeah.
everyone could extend that to others.
And I think the key there is that you weren't forced to, but you chose to.
Right. That's the most beautiful when you genuinely want to help out your loved ones, you know, and that's the thing, right? See, we live in a post-pandemic society, and allegedly we're supposed to be having another upcoming recession. So I'm just at a point in my life where who really gives a fuck about what who really gives a fuck about you in this world? Because I just this this pandemic proved how hedonistic we are, you know? Like when you look at the supermarkets, like look at all the people that were shoving each other for gallons of water and for
Social Darwinism, survival of the fittest mindset. I think more people need to abandon that.
you know, but I don't think I think you see, I agree with everything you're saying, and I'm not an individualist, nor do I agree with collectivism. I always have a neutral standpoint with everything because, again, I'm just so open minded. I've traveled, I have family in a lot of places. I've just been exposed to a lot, so that's why I always have this neutral approach. But again, right? You have like it's just it's so hard to deny individualism when again like Charles pointed out, like what happens when the government just decides all of a sudden to not give you that ability to rely on them, like what can you do for yourself? So I think we should have the ability to form the groups that we want, because like this, right? Charles is black, I'm black, Steve's black. I haven't seen your face, Cody, but the color doesn't matter, right? Like we all have our the reason why we're speaking to one another is because we share the same philosophy, right? And that we're forming a collective, right? But still, Charles, Steve, Jared, Jordan, Venera, Cody, Zachariah Hayes, we still have the ability to live as righteous men because we take pride in the individualism as well, right? So like I said, I'm always going to have the neutral standpoint on stuff. I think you should be the strong individual, right? And also have a strong tribe, to form that collective. But the collective is only going to be formed, like Steve said, if every individual is sharing the same philosophy or sharing the same insight with one another, regardless of race. Because when you guys, when people share the same interests, you don't really think about race. Like we're just talking to one another. I don't look at Steve as anything else, just Steve. I don't look at Charles anything else other than Charles, Venera, Cody, anything other than Venera, Cody. Just because we all share the same philosophy, you know. That's the only reason why we're speaking one another.
Yeah, you should be
Yeah,
definitely following Dr. Mason.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, well, Cody, you give us your closing thoughts on this. Then we'll go to Zachariah if there's any closing thoughts on the topic in terms of Roe v. Wade and the FINA stuff. Then Steve, then I'll give my thoughts and we'll be done.
All right, do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Cody.
Just what I tried to point out earlier is that I think that both the FINA decision and also the current Supreme Court decision fall along the same lines of thinking that I had when I was a very conservative Christian teenager about manipulating, laws and rules in order to force people, by one way or another, to live by the standards that I thought were most moral. And I find that to be very problematic because, again, morality is relative. So I'm worried about the path that such decisions can take people in the future.
All right, thank you, Cody. Zachariah, do you have anything further to add to the Roe v. Wade situation? Then
Listen,
Steve.
we live in a world where, I mean, I consider myself an open-minded individual, but no one, just from my experience, no one is open-minded. You know, everybody's closed-minded from how I see it, and the reason why I brought that up is because, again, people will never understand the other side of the point or the other side of the perspective, right? Like we will never ever have a conversation, like probably ever, with just people on the left with their stances and people on the right with their stance. And all of us, just whether we agree or whether we disagree, we still figure out a way to find, like, if you really want fucking true diversity, then we all need to come together, regardless of race, and just have these conversations. The problem is, no one's going to have them, right? Because you have people on the left. No matter, like I said, no matter how much you convince them, they're going to have their stances until the day they die. No matter how much you convince the Christians, no matter how much you convince the Muslims, no matter how many times you convince people who are religious to see stuff from the left's perspective, right? They'll never see it, right? And I think the left brings up good points and fucked up points. I think the right brings up great points and fucked up points as well. I've never been a person to just be on either side because I think they all, like, the left has its flaws, the right has its flaws. Black people we have our flaws. White people have their flaws. We all have our flaws. But the thing is, no one is going to admit, and no one's willing to have these conversations. And I think if we really want true diversity in this world, right, then we need the ability to be open minded. We need the ability to have more conversations because I think if we do, we can expose a lot of vulnerabilities. Not like too many vulnerabilities, but we can be vulnerable and have that freedom of expression. But when you have the left, taking away people's, freedom of speech, right? Like we won't be able to. It's like we won't have the ability to be individuals, right? It's like the left just wants everyone to just stay in this box, and you cannot do that. It's like when you do that, violence is going to happen because you can't convince a person's subconscious of thinking a specific type of way. Like the left has to consider all of these factors. You have to consider the geographical location that a specific person is raised from. You have to consider the education. You have to consider the like, did they grow up with two parents? Did they grow up with one? Every black person is going to be different. Every white person is going to be different. You want to talk about white privilege? Have you been to Seattle downtown? Because I've seen plenty of white trash fucks. I used to live out in Seattle. No one can tell me about white trash. Damn it, I saw it. I saw this shit, So I've been exposed to, I mean, I've never been in poverty myself, but I'm just talking about there's poverty everywhere. There's rich people everywhere. But it's like no one's going to be open-minded and just have the round table in the conversation. We won't have it. And like I said, the left can continue to categorize the masses in this box, and watch what's going to happen. You're going to have the January 6, 2021, but it's going to be 100 times worse. And a lot of people are going to die this time. That's just how I see it.
Thank you, Zachariah. So on to you, Steve.
Yeah, it was definitely good one, Zachariah. I really appreciate you, coming on today and making the decision to come on today and talk about what you wanted to feel, or talk about what you were feeling, and talk about your views. I think that's the only thing I'm going to disagree with you on, is that we have those types of conversations all the time. I'm a lefty atheist. Charles is not. And we have these conversations, and we disagree, and we butt heads on stuff, but we like there was a saying, is the mark of an educated mind is that is capable of holding two competing ideas in their head at the same time. Right. And if we're going to move forward as a society, and we're going to make things better, because we don't live just in one society anymore. We live in a global society.
Yes.
And how we conduct ourselves like this is paramount of importance to creating a global society that we all can enjoy and live in, and have space within, where we can express ourselves and our feelings and our beliefs, and put them up for the chopping block. Say, is this thing that I believe in reasonably good, or is it unreasonably bad? Right? We have to be able to allow people to criticize our views, and for us to have the integrity to be able to say, yeah, you're right, I was wrong. My belief in this was not correct. And being able to have these kind of conversations that we had today, even though we kind of tailed off the primary conversation a little bit, I think we gained a valuable insight, drastically more so, because now we're able to connect with more people. We're able to have deeper conversations with people. And for me, I wanted to kind of highlight one of the comments that was in the YouTube the stream, which was Isaac Hoffman's, where he very succinctly states, the aspect of human life requires freedom to exercise one's judgment. And that really is kind of the crux of the problem that we're having with the abortion debate, is that we're removing the ability of an individual to make a judgment call. But it's not so simple, because now we understand that there's another human being involved who is in utero, who doesn't have that voice to be able to speak for themselves. And so we need to start having good, nuanced, deep conversations built on an integrity, where we can have that conversation about what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do, and where the limits are. And I think it's conversations like this where we don't need to go into it fearing battle. We can go into it invested in hearing other people's perspectives, to try and find, at least at a bare minimum, a compromise, and to build a compromise where we can at least procure some reasonableness to society, so that we don't end in civil war. And that would be my final statements.
All right, Steve. Thank you very much for that.
Charles, just let me say this one. It'll take a couple seconds.
Okay.
I don't want a civil war either. But after what happened with that George Floyd situation, like, created a whole new completely scenario on race. Like, that whole it happened 2 years ago. Once that happened, everything changed. I don't care what anyone tells me. I mean, like, when it comes to race, like how people perceive race, that was the marking point right there. It was.
We need to introduce him to Dr. Mason.
Yeah, definitely. So please, Zachariah, there's a Discord link in the chat box. Please try and join Cat Discord. So
get in there, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now my final thoughts on this issue. One of the reasons why I started, having these conversations is because I wanted to engage with other people who thought differently from me. And I can say I've shifted my position on some issues, engaging with different people, which is what exchange of ideas should be about. Nobody is a fountain of knowledge, and at times when you interact with other people, they give you different ideas and you're illuminated. And there are some things that we would never agree on. I mean, Steve is my very good friend, but we disagree a lot. Even on the Discord all the time, we're always fighting. But that doesn't take away the fact that we're still friends, that we're still cool. We can fight all we want in terms of ideas, but we're
Charles,
still cool with each other. Yeah,
you see,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I see that. So
you know.
yeah, yeah. So now thoughts on the issue of Fina. Like I stated earlier, I think it's a bad decision. I think it was fine the way it was before, because now you've brought in children, and I think that children should be protected at all costs. I don't think that any law that will require children to be forcibly, I'm not saying it is requiring them, but it's going to push a lot of kids to transition, medically transition, or hormonally transition. I don't think that's a good thing. Adults can do whatever the hell they want to. Once you're above 18, do whatever you want. That's your business. I may disagree with it, but I am never going to be uh, in your way in doing whatever you want. So that's fine. Now, for the Supreme Court's decision on Roe v. Wade, I think it's a very neutral decision. I think it returns it back to the states, which is fine, because there are other things that have been returned back to the states as well, and they're handling it their own way. So I don't see why this is such an uproar. If Roe v. Wade had said all abortion is illegal, even though I don't support abortion, I would think that that's a bad thing, because it's going to cause a lot of bad blood, and you just cannot navigate such a situation. But I think that let states deal with it at their own level. Let the politics be much more engaged at the state level. If you don't like what's happening at your state legislature, get more involved in politics. Put in legislators and politicians who are favorable to your cause. Now, the only other problem I have with this ruling is that I don't know how easy it is for Supreme Court decisions to be overturned, because if it's just on the whim of conservative judges being there and they are overturning it, what happens when you have liberal judges now? If the liberal judges become the majority, wouldn't it just become a game of overturning based on ideology? So liberal judges can come in tomorrow and then overturn the overturn of Roe versus Wade. So I don't know how protected these decisions are. I think they should be protected, should be solidly protected, such that it cannot be overturned at the whim of the people in power at that particular point in time. I mean, the executive does that all the time, with Joe Biden rolling back some of the policies of Trump. And if a Republican president gets in, he might roll back the policies of his predecessor. But with laws, I think laws should be much more solid, such that it's not on the ideological basis of whoever is the majority on the benches. And the idea of conservative and liberal judges still doesn't make any sense to me. I think it shouldn't be judges shouldn't have an sort of ideological position. I think judges should just have, what does the law say? How can we best interpret the law? You understand, that is better for everyone. So having conservative judges, liberal judges, I think it's not a good thing in my opinion. And if there's one thing that they can change in that aspect, I think they should do that. So that's the conversation for today. Thank you all for coming. Steve, Cody, Zachariah, I enjoyed your contributions today, and I do hope to see you in other live streams. Please join Cat Discord, and that will be all for today. So it's goodbye. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.
But